US officials have confirmed Pakistan used Chinese J-10 jets to launch missiles against Indian fighter jets. What are some of the geopolitical impacts?
I think there are books that are going to be written about it, and I think there's a lot of interest going on around in the defense circles and the air war circles on this. Pakistan and India is a very interesting case because these two countries can, escalate the situation under the nuclear umbrella, and it is for the very first time that the Chinese equipment and Chinese air power has been, been tested on ground, and the results are phenomenal from what it appears. Now, how it plays out into, the defense contracting industry is something that is going to be very interesting. The Lockheed Martin, the Raytheons, and others will be looking at very closely. They will be talking to the U.S. government over here to open their checkbooks, and there's going to be also a lot of interest in the Indian side to have that sort of recognition that they perhaps need to diversify their equipment as well. So there's going to be a lot of, this event alone is going to open up a lot of more different conversations, which we're going to be seeing in the next few months.
If I can come in there on what Hussain just said, I completely agree with him. And this has consequences which go far beyond India. The fact that this is the first time that Chinese military equipment has brought down or shot Western platforms, absolutely modern Western platforms, has huge implications, huge consequences for a place like Taiwan and the Indo-Pacific. This is something which is going to play out in a big manner. A situation like this has never emerged earlier. There have been a lot of questions about the quality and the effectiveness of Chinese military equipment. But so far, what we have seen over the last 40 to 72 hours, the equipment has actually performed well against Western platforms. And this is going to have massive geopolitical consequences. And we're going to see this play out in a very, very big manner in the coming weeks and months.
It's been described as the country's worst confrontation in more than 2 decades. But how have recent events been different to previous escalations? Hussain, if we could start with you.
They're very different in many ways, but they're also very similar and scripted in many other ways. And I guess it goes down to two key issues over here. One is the nature of the two states that has evolved over the years. In the past 70 years, Pakistan has come to become a very hardcore military regime where there is a military rule, a lot of problems related to human rights and domestic issues. And India has become more of a the largest democracy in the world, yet sliding towards authoritarianism. And the second point is related to the shift in the balance of power. In the past couple of decades, we have noticed Pakistan's economy to be literally on the brink of crisis, having a lot of trouble domestically in the political crisis, economic crisis. And India is on the cusp of a very different kind of a trajectory in terms of economic growth. So I think these differences in the nature of the state and the balance of power is a recurring pattern of why they're constantly having these, inflection points and standoffs over Kashmir and over Balochistan.
And Sushant, would you broadly agree with that? What does each country stand to lose or gain if the situation were to be escalated?
No, absolutely. I completely agree with him. The nature of the two states, and particularly the transformation of the Indian state, or the sudden change in the Indian state, not only to authoritarianism but to a very strong, strident kind of Hindu nationalism under Mr. Modi, has altered the nature of the Indian state and the way in which it responds to Pakistan. But to come to your question proper as such, one of the most difficult and dangerous things this time is that there is no talk about de-escalation as such. Both the countries seem to be climbing up the escalation ladder very quickly. So whether you look at 2016, 2019, 2008, 2001, at all points in time, there was a desire for both sides to de-escalate very quickly, to find an off-ramp and get onto it. This time, unfortunately, for what we have seen in the last 3 or 4 days, there seems to be a race to the bottom almost. People may call it a ladder, but actually it's a race to the bottom where both sides are trying to target each other and hit at each other. And now we have the U.S. Vice President's statement saying that he's not interested. The United States is not interested if two countries are fighting a war. United States has been the most honest broker, which has, even if not an honest broker, it has been an interlocutor, which has tried to bring peace between the two countries or reduce tensions between the two countries. And if the United States says that, then I'm really worried about the situation.
It really is a tense time at the moment, and a lot of our audience is probably wondering how prepared are the two countries' armies if an outright war were to break out?
So the armies of the two countries are reasonably prepared. I won't say that they are fully prepared or they They are at the top of their game professionally. India's military has not really had the kind of resources that it needs for modernization under Mr. Modi, which is a big surprise because he's a nationalist leader, and that would have meant that he would have devoted a large amount of resources for building up the military. There's also shortage of soldiers. There's a large amount of, large quantum of Indian soldiers who are committed on the China border because of the ongoing border crisis with China, which has essentially not been resolved for the past 5 years. Pakistan, as we just heard, has had its own share of economic and political problems. Pakistani army feels besieged in a certain manner because of the political situation inside the country, and there's a lot of pressure on the Pakistani military to prove its credibility. But let's be clear, rather than looking at the overall numbers between India and Pakistan, we should look at the local balance of power, and the local balance or the regional balance of power on the border itself is more evenly balanced. The two armies, the two militaries are more evenly balanced. India does not have the kind of sway which it would look like if you were to look at the overall or gross numbers, because those numbers are a part of those numbers is also dedicated towards the China border.
Hussain, what are your views on that?
So the way I'm going to try to, capture what Sushant just said is essentially India will have to comprehensively defeat Pakistan, while Pakistan basically does it, has to make sure that it doesn't really lose. So there is that there's that feeling that India doesn't have the level of resources and modernization that it needs to really comprehensively defeat Pakistan. And Pakistan isn't, despite the fact that it doesn't have the economic base or the political struggle, but it does have some level of military infrastructure, institutions, and as we have seen, the air power to defend itself. Now, the issue over here is also related to, the domestic consequences. And much of what we see right now, I believe, is being driven by the domestic pressures. The Prime Minister Modi has a huge compulsion because of the recent downing of the airplanes and the terrorist attack in Kashmir, that he had to respond. On the Pakistani side as well, we have a military regime, a very strong dictatorship over there, which naturally is losing ground domestically. So it becomes very convenient as well to launch an external war to mobilize domestic support against former Prime Minister Imran Khan and be able to have that sort of command and control inside the country. So it's a lot of driven by the domestic politics as well.
And taking control of the narrative has historically been integral when tensions have flared like this between India and Pakistan. Tell us more about the information war that's also being waged. Sushant.
Yeah, it's a funny little thing, the truth is the first casualty in war. And even in times when there was no social media, no digital platforms, no digital technologies, coverage of war was always very difficult, and getting the actual news was very, very difficult. But what we have now, both on the Indian side and the Pakistani side, but particularly on the Indian side, is very, very tight control of information, supported by an ecosystem of absolutely, lunatic social media handles and these digital platforms which have gone bonkers. Both the countries, both the governments, both the establishment have such a tight control over their media. It is highly possible that both sides can declare victory, or the people of the both sides can believe that they have won, and this may allow the situation to de-escalate rather happily without an escalation, because both sides can believe simultaneously that they have won, irrespective of what the situation is on the ground. Just to talk about the example you said about the few Indian fighter jets being shot down reportedly, as has been reported by CNN, New York Times, and others. What we have on the Indian side is not a single newspaper has even spoken about this fact. There's not even a single line of reportage on the claims, even alleging that an Indian fighter jet has been shot down, or a few Indian fighter jets have been shot down. So the Indian population continues to believe that nothing of that sort has happened. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, there is news which is going on that more than 5 Indian fighter jets have been shot down by the Pakistani Air Force. So essentially, Pakistanis can believe that they have succeeded, Indians can believe that they have succeeded, and both can hopefully, even though they cannot live happily ever after, but still somehow find a way in which they can be happy about the outcome of the war, irrespective of the reality.
I agree with Sushant on some of the points. And in fact, I think between the India and Pakistan standoff, disinformation is winning on both sides. And that kind of is a good ramp up for both of these countries, because they're going to be really essentially targeting to their audiences. My best outcome from this could be, and I believe that we have to address the root cause on this. And that is that the shift in the balance of power, but more importantly, the nature of the two states are too off at the moment. And you have these authoritarian regime in India, which is emerging in the largest democracy. But in Pakistan, we have a very hardcore, full-scale military regime, which is backed by the American IMF money and all of that. So I do believe that if the long-term democratic and development interests of Pakistan are preferred over the short-term security interests of the United States, then we could possibly have a sort of return of democracy and the country on a pathway where it has credible leadership that can negotiate and bargain, or have a sort of peace dialogue with India, which could be more sustainable. That's what my thought would be.
Really interesting to get both your views, Hussain Nadim and Sushant Singh. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.